Okay, so let's get started. This presentation is how can we meet our career and educational pathways in the classroom. So everybody has heard of the career and educational pathways or career pathways. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But before we get to that final, we're going to define it today. Before we get to that final definition, let's go to the next slide, talk about where it came from. So Arne Duncan, you guys familiar with this guy? There he is. He is the secretary of Department of Education, and a few years ago educational career pathways became not just an adult education type of initiative, it's an initiative that's running from post-secondary all the way down to the kindergarten level. So this is a huge initiative. It does come from Washington, D.C., and I think one of the things as we began hearing career pathways, we were thinking, well, okay, what is this? Is this the new wave? Is this, what is this? But now we have legislation from WIOA. That's how I say it. I don't know how everybody else is saying it, but the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act, and coming directly from the office of Arne Duncan from OCTAE, which Dr. Johan Uven is in charge of. So we have this national movement, and now we're seeing it start to filter down into the Texas movement. And as you've heard our director say, Anson Green, in some ways Texas is already doing this. So we're really lucky to be in that place. But let's look at some of the quotes that have come from a few years ago. And CORD, a lot of people are familiar with CORD, the Center for Occupational Research and Development. In order to thrive in these challenging times, we need to connect adult education to economic development through career pathways. So I think it changes the mindset that we've been in. We've been in the mindset of, yes, people need jobs, but we need to get people their general education diploma, or they need to learn English first. And so a lot of programs and instructors, because I hear this even in my area, which is San Antonio, saying, well, I don't see how we could go into career pathways if people don't have their diploma first. And so I'm going to disagree with that today. I believe that you can go into career pathways. I believe you can start career pathways from the moment the student walks in the door, but I also believe that we can start training for careers a lot sooner than many folks may think. So, so these are challenging times, I think, because we're looking at partnering in ways that we've never partnered before. We're looking at delivering education in ways that we've never delivered them before. Okay, so the adult education system was simply designed to meet the goal of post-secondary workforce readiness. So for many decades, its major purpose has been to provide basic literacy, English language instruction for the GED, kind of reiterating what I just said. And I think what we want to see happen is education and workforce coming together at the same time. So let's go to the next one. All right, so you know that I'm coming from an iBest pathway, and a few people raise their hand. Is everybody familiar with iBest? No? Okay, let me give you the real quick. Here's the elevator speech. iBest stands for Integrated Basic Education Skills Training. And what this research suggests, and I'm going to say has proven and is proven to work in my area, is that integrated basic education, that's your ESL or your basic skills, and skills training at the same time provide students with higher persistence and higher success rates. Okay, and so I didn't give you all the research. There's 10 years of research out there. I suggest you go and look at it. It's originated in Washington State. The programs vary from state to state, how they're implemented, to include Texas, where we're not entirely able to deliver iBest the way that Washington was able to deliver iBest. The reason why is partially because of our funding. So we have modified iBest. In San Antonio, we have Alamo iBest, which means that we're doing a lot of the principles that worked in an iBest format, but we're not doing it exactly the way Washington did it. We're not doing the clean model, so to speak. All right, so wait, go back one more. So what are the things that this research shows? And so I would suggest that you go take a look at this research, and you'll see that we have really good data on this. Accelerated programs. Accelerated, when we say accelerated, that means we're going through quicker, but we're not going through watered down. And so a lot of people think, well, accelerated. We know from Quigley's persistence reports, right, that what's our student staying power? Anybody remember that? It's a 3, but it's not months. 3 weeks. 3 weeks is what, in our traditional formats of programs, is what our students have before they decide that maybe they need to do something else or life responsibilities takes over. Okay, so when we say accelerated, we're saying we need to go quick because people have real needs and they need to get into the workplace, they need to get educated quickly as we can go. But we can't change what we're actually doing in the classroom, right? We have to accelerate, but we have to make it intense, I guess is the best word. So we know accelerated programs, the quicker you can get students in and out the door and into a job, the better persistence you're going to have, and the more likelihood that they're going to return to continue down their educational pathway. We also know that contextualized curriculum works. So contextualized being that how do we relate the English language learning, the adult basic education, to what it is that students are actually going to do in the job. It's easy to do when you have a group sitting together that are all doing the same things, right? But it's a little bit more difficult if you have a group of people like you have here, all coming from different places with different interests. How can we contextualize in the classroom to that? So we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Holistic wraparound services, we know that that also increases people's ability to stay, and that means not just having the instructor in the room, but also having the case management, whether it's coming from your program or coming from other types of programs that you partner with. And then it leads to high demand occupations. So what we're doing, has anybody ever been to a graduation of GED graduation? Yeah, okay, and when they walk across the stage, what does almost everybody that walks across the stage say they want? Better job, better job. Try it next time when you're going to have a graduation or a certificate ceremony. Ask students to say what their goal is, and as they walk across the stage, almost every single one of them is going to say they're here for a better job. So it's got to lead to high demand occupations. It's got to lead to something in the end that's tangible. Okay. So our challenge, and when I say our challenge in Texas, is that by 2020, at least 60% of the jobs will require a career certificate or college degree. And you may have heard that statistic before. That's coming directly from the Higher Education Coordinating Board. And that's their goal, that's our goal, that's a connection with workforce, with education, and with adult education. So 60% of the jobs, and when you say 60% of the jobs, we want to make sure you say certificate or college degree, because not all people are going to go for a 4-year degree, and maybe that's not even as relevant as it used to be. It is for some professions, but not for a lot of the skilled labor that we're looking to fill. Okay.
Melissa, are you taking questions now?
Sure.
60% of the job. I work with some people that are house cleaners, you know, Mary Maid kind of people, or just clean private homes. Is that part of the 40%?
Okay, so probably, because when we're talking about the 60% of the jobs, we're talking about high demand and living wage occupations. And so those are usually going to include some kind of certificate type of education. And so house cleaning situation may be high demand, but not living wage. So the IBEST program is focused on those two things. Okay, and so here's just another one of those statistic things that I think people should take a look at. Adult education population. In 2010, the most recent research that I could find to actually quote to you is that 7% of the adult education population actually transitioned to college. So if we know that 60% of our population is going to need some type of certification or college, and we look at the transition rate, and I believe this is even high. Having ran adult education programs, I know that I never made it to 7%. So I think this is even a little bit high. But let's say that this is as accurate, and it runs across the board for most of our programs. 7% of the students will not actually make it into a college program if they go from the traditional GED ESL. Similarly, I'm going to say community colleges have not been faring much better. This is from our community college, from Alamo Colleges. So those students that are falling into the categories of adult education that come through the college doors, 11% actually make it into an actual college class. So that's not very good either. So that's saying, well, our traditional way of doing things in the college hasn't exactly been working that well either. Okay, so having given all that background, I'd like you to take a moment. We'll just do a quick think, pair, share. What does career pathways mean to you? How do you define it? So take a moment. Right now we're going to take about 1 minute. Write down what is career pathways? How do you define it? What's the definition? And no, let's not look at no phones, not yet. This is just out of your brain, what comes to the top of your head. There's no right or wrong answer, but what do you think of when you think of the term career pathways? Okay, so let's just take three brave individuals. I guess our session's running really, really fast, so let me take 3 individuals that are willing to say, what is your definition of career pathways? Yes, ma'am.
Transitioning my students from their seat in my classroom through appropriate training for a life career.
Transitioning to...
Students from classroom through appropriate training for lifetime career.
Okay. From classroom to... Okay, this is really rough notes, all right? No pictures.
A life career.
Appropriate career. All right, great. Very shortened version. Thank you. Okay, who else? Yes, ma'am.
Going to set goals with defined steps.
Set goals with defined steps. Okay. And one more. Yes, ma'am.
Roads to jobs.
Ooh, roads to jobs. Okay. Let's look at the next slide. And this is, I'm going a little bit quicker than I'd hoped to, but this is the Wikipedia version. Next slide. Take a moment to look at that. Can everyone agree with that? Yeah, okay. If not, you can go to Wikipedia and give your 2 cents. They are still, because there was a line saying that they're still open for suggestions on this. So it's a very loosely defined, but I think we can all agree it's adopted at the federal, local, and state levels, and it is training and learning opportunities. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is how Texas defines it. Now, I've got a TWC person in the room, and last night, for the life of me, I could not think of the 3rd term, so I'm going to put her on the spot. We have 3 definitions in adult education and literacy of what career pathways are. We have workplace literacy, and this is where basically you're offering workplace literacy in an employer's either place of work or in partnership with an employer, where they're either partially funding it or you're partially and then we have integrated education training. This is where we're putting together the training with the adult basic education skills at the same time. And then I said on the 3rd one, because I could not think of what the term was, I was going through all the RFPs, and so forgive me, but I put niche programs because these are specialty populations, and the way I look at them is that when we're looking at a population. So for example, the first one, ESL health professionals, we have a welcome back center, and this is where people who are educated in their home country may come to our center and look at how they can transfer the skills that they already have into skills that are in their current profession. So if you are a doctor in your home country and you want to be a doctor in this country, we try to match those skills and find out what the next steps are. A lot of it involves ESL that's going to be contextualized. Also, we have community projects. So when we are trying to develop specific pipelines that may not meet the high demand or living wage occupation, all the components, but somebody's willing to pay for it because the model works for students and it creates a pipeline for them. This is what we look at under niche programs. Okay, so how do we get that all the way down into our classroom, which is what this session is really about, and I'm going to have to go at lightning speed at this point. So I'm going to go really quickly, but what I'm going to suggest to you is that we can still contextualize if we use a student-centered approach. If we're using a project-based learning approach in the classroom, we can begin to contextualize to all the different people that are in the classroom. We can create transitions, and for non-traditional students, we can incorporate our 21st century skills, improve our learner persistence and goal setting guides, even if you don't have the situation or the resources or the partners as of yet to be able to provide those specific skills that students are going to be looking for. You can begin to do all of these things in your classroom right now. And okay, so now what? What does this mean? What does this mean? This have to do with my class. And so I think a lot of people that are sitting in the classroom are actually on the ground with adult learners. How are you going to implement this? How do you get started with the students in the class? How do you get started with the students that walk through the door? Okay, so I've developed, let's go to the next. Obviously, we want to start with goal setting. And somebody already said that in number 2, set goals and have defined steps. Absolutely. So how do we start setting those goals? What are you doing to set those goals? Yes, we have the goal setting sheet that many of you are using, but I'm going to suggest that sometimes when we do that in programs, because it's a required piece of paper, it might end up in a file somewhere. Did we really discuss it with the students? Did somebody sit down one-on-one and have a conversation about what their goals mean to them and what they're doing in this classroom? So that's one step. Let's go to the next one. Okay, and then I'm going to say we can start to develop professional portfolios. And those of you who've heard me before have heard this a lot of times. But professional portfolio seems to really make sense because we can start to, all the resources that we have in a classroom, we can use the ventures from Cambridge, we can use anything that you already have existing in your classroom, you can make up lessons. But if you keep people focused on a professional portfolio, which is something that they can walk away with by the time they leave your class, then it keeps the conversation continually focused on why we're here. Why do I have to learn English? Because once you realize that learning English is going to take a really long time, or that you may be at the 3rd grade level in math and to get to your high school diploma completion is going to take a really long time, you need something to continue to motivate you through the process. So let's go to the next slide. So this, what you have in your hands, because I thought maybe you could read this and then I thought, well, maybe not, you know.
If they don't mind, we can go until like 10:30 because there's a long break and then lunch doesn't start till 11.
Are you all okay with that? Going a little bit longer? Okay. Okay. So then that would be, then I would not have to go as fast as I'm going right now. That would be great. All right, so this chart, some of you have it in color and some of you have it in black and white, but Travis is able to get this to you, and I'm going to show you that this is free and online, but I wanted you to have something in your hands to be able to look at. You can use this chart. What this is it's a way, now this one is based on ESL learners. Okay, so the way you would use this chart is, does everybody baseline test their ESL learners? Okay, so you know what NRS level they come in? All right, so if you look across the top and you determine what NRS level a person is coming in, the green starting with 1, yellow 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you can develop a professional portfolio at any level of speech and writing ability. That's what I'm going to suggest to you today, because you might think, well, my students are really low level, so how can I possibly start a professional portfolio with them if they can't even speak English or read and write? Well, I'm going to suggest to you, it may not be the professional portfolio you're looking that you would expect to see, but you can begin those preliminary conversations and activities, and they scaffold all the way up. Okay, so when you're looking at this chart, you look at, all right, now down the side on theme, we have things that should be in a professional portfolio. Now, obviously, you can put whatever you want to in the professional portfolio. These are just some things that I thought an employer would like to see. And this is based on about 20 years of doing this in classrooms. So these are things that an employer would like to see, but certainly you could think of other things to add into these portfolios. But let's look at the first one, the autobiography. So the autobiography is under the first section, it's the theme. If I have a person that is an NRS 6, that means they're about ready to transition to college, then it is reasonable to say that this person should be able to write a first-person essay, or they may not succeed in college. Would you all agree? Okay, so that's what you see way over here. That's what we're going for. We're working backwards from the college and career readiness skills that were developed by Texas. Okay, so in Texas, we say that somebody who's ready to go to college needs to be able to write a first-person essay narrative. So what are you going to do with your person that's at NRS 1? Well, we start preparing people by orally speaking their autobiography and start talking about things that are appropriate. It's also appropriate to somebody that needs to go get a job. You need to be able to introduce yourself. You need to be able to tell the relevant things that an employer wants to hear about yourself, and when those are appropriate. So the discussions about appropriate soft skills, career readiness can happen from the moment that you're starting with the autobiography. The second thing that is down here, and then I'll go through these more in depth, but you see how the chart works, right? So, so if you're somewhere in the middle, I might expect from you a little bit of writing. It may or may not be on a computer. We might be starting. I would say our NRS level 3 is where we start blending into the computer skills. So a program without computers that's serving low-level students can still do this. And a program that does have computer skills can start transitioning their students on basic Word, Excel, PowerPoint. These are basic things that everybody has. It's not expensive type of online software you have to buy. So that's how the chart works. Now let's go through what some of the things are more in depth. Okay, so we start with the autobiography. The autobiography is important for the reasons that I just stated, but it's also important because students need to tell their stories. I hear students all the time saying they can't connect with a teacher because they don't understand where I'm coming from. And these are students that are both ESL and GED. So how better to get to know your student than to have them write about themselves? And also, so this is always the lesson that I suggest you do first. You learn so much about your students that they might be afraid to reveal in class. You also learn how they're writing because they're going to write like they speak. And so you can catch the big things that stand out that you need to be able to catch right away and start correcting. Okay, so then the very next important thing, but this is almost interchangeable. In fact, I do this in the first week of our classes. We do a career interest inventory. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, some of my students are advanced because I'm in the IBEST program and I'm looking at for people who are ready to make that transition. So we actually go on the Workforce website and use the ONET, and we do the full-blown, I think it's 250 question test. But it basically comes down to a RISIC test. And I have also used a handwritten, I think 20 question test that we have in our orientation packets that's RISIC. And we even have a RISIC that has pictures like this. You can circle what you want to do. So how do you go to the lowest levels? Well, if you cannot read or write or speak to me, you can at least circle some pictures. I may not know exactly what you want to do, but I'll have an idea of whether you want to work inside or outside, office or health. You know, all those big things that are going to come into play as you're getting started.
What is that word, RISIC?
It stands for all the different personality types.
What's the
RIASIC, is that right?
Okay, I was just curious.
If you type that in any way in all caps, it will come up with the right thing in Google. And you'll see all different kinds of tests that you can take from there. The workforce one, though, is very reliable. And so we do use that for students that are able to read and write fairly proficiently. But if they're not, we can work with just circling pictures. If they're not very good at reading and writing but can do some, we work with a shorter test. So all those things. But the most important thing, I think, that needs to come out of the conversation is not that you took the RISIC test. It's confirming that you either know what you want to do or you don't know what you want to do. A lot of people want a better job, but they haven't quite decided what those better jobs are. A lot of people want a better job, but they're watching what's on the commercials, and so that's all they see is the better job. But did you know in San Antonio they run medical assisting on a loop, and there are no medical assisting jobs right now in San Antonio? They're full. So how do students really know what's out there? First of all, let's identify what their interest levels are, what's going to connect. You don't want to put somebody into medical assisting that would be better off being in accounting and that kind of thing. You need to have those conversations. Those conversations happen one-on-one when you take those tests. Those conversations can happen in a whole classroom. Actually, I make our students commit to something that they're willing to study over the next 8 weeks. That's how we do that. So we have them follow the professional portfolio and commit to, now I'm not making you commit for your entire life. You could change after that 8 weeks, but after 8 weeks you will know if you really like this profession or if you don't. So the career inventories are really important. People say, well, don't you ever get tired of taking them? Not really, because the students, it's about them. And so every time you turn that classroom back to the students and making it about them and not about what you developed, they're into it. I've had many teachers tell me why students wouldn't be into it, but I have yet to walk into a class to find students not interested in taking their career inventory test and finding out what their results are, even if they know it. I even enjoy it. I've taken it a lot of times. I should be a brain surgeon. That's what I've determined. Because if you start getting into some of those tests, you'll find some others like reality check and different things like that. Really get into exploring them. But what we do find oftentimes is just like that goal setting sheet. You go in and you take that career inventory. If you don't have that conversation about it, it's so easy to just end up in the portfolio and nobody talked about it. And then the student is still thinking, well, okay, I guess I should be a medical assistant because apparently that's what they're showing on TV all the time. Also, in the career inventories, getting real live people to come in and speak, real employers, real workforce people, people who are from the colleges, people who are monitoring these openings all the time that can either validate or invalidate what jobs are really available right away. Okay, so after we do career inventories and autobiographies, get to know ourselves, get to know what's professional, then we start doing the pathway search. Really what this is it's research in disguise. I think we could all agree that one of the things you have to be able to do to survive in college is write a research paper. And many of our students have not been exposed to a research paper. If they're coming from another country, their idea of a research paper is different than the college expectations that we have here. So starting, and if you haven't made it through school, I've had a lot of freshmen that have made it through school that still don't know how to do a research paper because maybe it didn't happen with their teacher for whatever reason. So starting early on is never too early. And when we talk about pathway search, we have different ways. So let's go to the next one. Here's some different options. People say, well, how can I research in my classroom? I don't have the resources. Well, okay, so here's the counter 1, 2, and 3 to all of the arguments. Number one, the instructor can do the research for the student. Most likely instructors have access to a computer, and if you know what career your students if you know what career your students want to pursue, you can go onto this website below. This is the Occupational Outlook. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this before. It has almost every kind of occupation you can possibly imagine. You can print up the short articles and hand them to your students in class. So if you don't have that computer access, we can work with it in class and have that research available. Number 2, you can organize a trip to the library. This is what I learned early on in college, is that if I don't want to find the answer myself, ask a librarian, because librarians love to do this, right? They love to do it, but they don't come forward. So I always see librarians sitting at the desk alone and nobody talking to them. So I learned early in college, I can get to the research really quick by going and asking this person, and they will find you everything. And so also libraries enjoy showing off the resources that they've purchased, that they have available in libraries. So organizing a trip to the library, if you have students that are able to go, carpool with each other and go take a tour, and you get the day off because the librarian will take over that day. And then the third one, one more, online search. If you do have the access to the computers, students have phones in their classroom, tablets, you have lots of options. They can go and they can look at this themselves. Occupational Handbook Outlook has videos in English and in Spanish that show you. They don't just tell you about the program, they show you what the different occupations are, what they look like. So it's a really good way to start researching. And it's research in disguise. You're getting to know what the student likes. They get to read about what they're going to be doing in the future, and it holds that interest level a little bit longer. Then you actually start with the writing. This is always the hair puller. But again, it's one of those things that if we don't do this and we try to transition our students into college programs, whether they're certificate or associates programs, they're going to struggle. And in fact, a lot of it can be a deal breaker. A lot of that 11% that you see in Alamo colleges, people will drop out their first year of Comp 101 when they find out they've got to write a research paper every 2 weeks and turn it in. Yeah. Okay, so applying soft skills, another thing that we can do for the professional portfolio that really helps students get into their interest is send them out on the job. Have them, work with your students to create opportunities to do a job observation. Students are going to be scared to do this alone. It's one of the things that teachers struggle with the most, doing this job observation, but it's also the thing that makes or breaks the student persistence. Once students get out there on the job and see what it's like and get to interact with people doing something that they want to do, you have them. You have them for life. They're going to finish. Or they're going to say, I absolutely don't want to do that. Okay, let's skip through that because I know we're running short on time again. Building a resume, of course this is important, but I put it down the line because it's not the most important thing that you do right away. It's something that you begin to develop over time and through the research. So building the research, college knowledge, start talking to your students really early on about the college information. If you don't have a lot of college knowledge yourself, take a visit to the campus and start to get some because it changes every year. How to apply online, how to get FAFSA or TASFA, and I can go on and on. That's a whole other 3-hour presentation, how to apply for college. But it's really important that if we're the first line of contact with our students in the classroom, that we have at least a minimal amount of information so that we can point our students in the right direction, not just motivate them that they can, but help them through the process to an extent. Let's go back one more. So also talking about college in that it doesn't have to be a 4-year degree. This is an example of a career pathway. It means that I could start with health literacy in your classrooms. I can move to a CNA certificate. I might go to work, and what we know from Alamo colleges is that students have about a 24-month turnaround time. So they may go to work with their CNA certificate. We certainly don't want them to stop there. That's not a living wage. We want them to continue on, but it may take them 24 months to really get their job under their belt, get comfortable with it, and realize they're ready to come back for more and continue along the pathway. And so then it could be LVN, registered nurse. Actually, health pathways are a lot more complex than this, but you get the idea. Teamwork presentations. The other things that we need to continually do in our classrooms is have students present often, and present together as teams. Because if you've been to a college class lately, you'll find out that every one of them requires you to do a team presentation. So it's part of what we do. It's a different way of learning, and we have to get our students prepared for that. Okay, so I guess at this point we want to shift over, because all of this stuff that I'm presenting to you that went really, really, really fast is online and available to you for free. And I have developed worksheets. So there you go to cambridge.org, career pathways. And so the sheet that you have in front of you, we have the ability, let's go down to autobiography and 1A. So we got our NRS level 1 and we want to start with the autobiography, so click on that one. Here is the lesson and how to do it with your beginning level students. So all you have to do is click on those different ones, okay? Now, in the publishing world, we're limited to less worksheet. So certainly you can expand on these worksheets. The worksheets are going to be a brief overview. They're designed to be 45-minute lessons that can be capstones to what you do already. So you could take a lesson a week and just do it, not changing what you're already doing, but just add it to what you're doing. You can go a lot further than we've gone in the worksheet, a lot further. And I think that if you have ventures books, you can have more in-depth professional development, and we can go a lot further at your site, and that's included in the subscription or the purchases that you already have. So I don't know if Travis wants to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're not using Ventures, people pay for a list to come in and say, okay, how do I do this in my program? So I want everyone to know that Cambridge is a nonprofit. Part of our mission statement is we give away resources and materials and sometimes PD to programs. You know, if you're using our program, it's easier to get this in person. If you're not using it, maybe it's a webinar, something like that. So just everyone, I can give you my card. I don't have a card for everyone, but if you want more information, feel free to contact me after the session.
Okay. So I guess at this point, if we have any questions, I just want to make sure that you're aware that this exists. It is listed under Ventures, but you don't have to be using Ventures to do it. It wasn't designed in cohort with the actual books. So.